Welcome, everyone, to the Two Reel Cinema Club. My name is Andres Lorente.
And I'm James Rosica. And every episode on the Two Reel Cinema Club, we watch two movies, a new movie and an old movie, and we try and connect the dots. And this is quite exciting. This is like our silver anniversary, isn't it? It's episode 25.
Ooh.
How exciting. I hope you brought a cake. I didn't bring a cake. If people do want to share the cake that we didn't bring, where can they find us on the internet?
Good segue. Oh, my goodness.
I thought that was seamless.
Basically, if you pop Two Reel Cinema Club in anywhere, you'll find us. We're on things like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. So if you have friends who are interested in hearing people talk about films incessantly, then please point them in that direction. Also on Twitter, Two Reel Cinema Club. Two Reel Cine Club at twitter.com. Instagram, Two Reel Cinema Club at instagram.com. And we do have a blog, tworeelcinemaclub.com. You can always email us also at tworeelcinemaclub@gmail.com. I do check that eventually, but I haven't seen any appropriate messages sent to us recently. But I do like the
There's a lot of very inappropriate spam.
Those are the good ones, yeah. So this week we are talking about a couple of films. Nope, which is I did say that. That's the entire film title. Nope. Which someone said might be not of planet Earth.
Ah.
I don't think that's what it is, but so there's Nope, 2022, written directed by Jordan Peele, and then also from 1984, The Brother from Another Planet, a John Sayles film that feels very much like an 80s film. It was just brought back so much nostalgia for me.
It's people of color in science fiction this week, isn't it?
It kind of is, yeah.
Absolutely. Now, so you saw Nope. You were telling me at home. So you rented it at home and watched it like on your screen at home, yeah?
Yes, we have a pretty good sized screen, so that was tempting. I actually just run my computer into my television with an HDMI cable. We have a very dated surround sound system, but it works pretty well. And I could have seen this in the theater. It probably would have been about the same amount in terms of costs. So it evens out that way. I think I would have done better on a bigger screen with bigger volume, but definitely enjoyed it. It's a great way to watch at home. So I've got a good setup, so that does work for me.
So we watched it at the local Odeon on National Cinema Day.
Ooh.
Which is so this happened in the US. It happened in the UK. It was £3 for any ticket for any screening for the whole day.
Oh my goodness.
So we trot along on Saturday afternoon, and joyously the screen was pretty much packed. It was like 80% full.
Oh, good.
It was kind of 50% full of teenagers who wanted to check their phones and chat and make jokes halfway through the film. So good and bad things. But I think for a film like Nope, seeing it in a big crowd of people, and a big crowd of young people actually, is probably the right way to see it. There's a bunch of scenes, but there's a lot of tension, and tension is just ramped up when you have a big crowd to watch it with. Yeah,
I haven't had that lately in the theaters because most of the films I've seen are maybe 20 to 30% full. And this was two middle-aged people sitting on a sofa, very well worn and very well known to them, and one, not I, was on her computer a fair bit. So she took that role of the teenagers in your theater, and then here I am with my clipboard writing stuff down. I mean, it's not exactly the cinematic experience that anyone would consider ideal, but it happened. It was, I gotta say, it was very convenient. So.
Now I've got to put this up. We should probably say this every episode that we are going to spoil the plot of Nope.
Oh,
so if you haven't seen it yet,
in fact, I think we've already spoiled it basically. But just by listening to the podcast, we may have spoiled this experience for you. But we've given you warning.
I think it's worth going to see. So I mean, I think see it and then come back and listen to the pod. The pod will still be here.
Yeah.
So everything hereafter is a fair game. I'm afraid we're going to spoil the whole lot. So let me. I'm going to do a little summary for people who either haven't seen it and don't care about it being spoiled, or people who saw it so long ago that they need to be reminded of what the story is. So it's a 2022 science fiction film set in California, and the main character OJ, he and his father Otis Sr., they run Hayward Hollywood horses. So they are animal wranglers for the film industry. And right at the top of the film, Otis Sr. is killed in a freak accident by a coin falling out of the sky. What I think is actually a really great opening. There's a slightly enigmatic opening which the film returns to later, which is a short scene from a sitcom that goes horribly wrong. But when the film's proper opens up, we get this early scene of Otis Sr. being killed. And as a result, OJ, the son, and his sister, M, they're left with this business as horse wranglers. It's not really their strength. They're struggling to get the business to pay the bills. So they're kind of more or less selling it off. But while they sell off the business, at night, their electricity cuts off. Something is worrying their horses. They're pretty sure it's a UFO. There's an alien visitor in the sky, and they decide to do what any sensible person would do in 2022 with the thought of being near aliens. They decide to film it to try and make money out of it. So they get the local electronics guy, Angel, to set up surveillance cameras. They bait the UFO with this big plastic horse. And they keep getting foiled in their attempt to get proper footage. They rope in this local cowboy figure, Ricky, who runs a kind of sort of fake cowboy village quite close to where their ranch is. He's been buying horses from OJ as OJ is selling off his stock, and it turns out that he also wants to try and get the attention of the UFO. He is the guy who's been feeding it horses in the hope that he will be able to tame it. And we learn halfway through the film that his backstory is that he's the former child star of a sitcom that featured a trained chimpanzee, and the sitcom ended in violent tragedy when the chimpanzee attacked the cast and everything went haywire. And he's still trying to cope with that trauma, and he's trying then, I think, to control the animal that he was unable to control when he was a child. Ricky's punishment for trying to control the UFO, which is what it really is, which is sucking horses up into the sky, is that he also gets abducted by the UFO, as do the paying audience who've come to see him feed it a horse. So there are 40 people sucked up into this UFO to be digested horribly. And OJ and M are at home when the UFO returns in the middle of the night and spits out the indigestible contents of all the people that it's eaten in its rain of blood over their house, which is absolutely terrifying. So they finally kind of hatch this complicated plan to capture the UFO on film. They hire a big Hollywood cinematographer. They set up a whole bunch of cameras. They get these inflatable tube men and put them around the ranch, because when the UFO arrives, it cuts out the electricity of any electrical devices nearby, and so that will show them when it's approaching where it is. They use these hand-cranked cameras which won't fail when the electricity goes down. And there's this big sort of third act, adventurous scene where they put all the pieces in place, and they wait for the UFO to turn up, and it all goes horribly wrong. A motorcyclist turns up, the photographer gets eaten. It all looks like it's all going to go to hell, and eventually they manage to get rid of the UFO, which turns out to be some kind of otherworldly creature and not a vehicle at all, by feeding it this enormous helium-filled cowboy balloon from Ricky's fake cowboy village. The alien eats the balloon, it explodes. M manages to take a photograph just at the last minute. You know, they've captured the footage that they needed to capture, and most of them have survived. And that is the note that the film ends on. Watching it on your cinema at home, this film, which is billed as a horror film, did you find it horrifying?
Not terribly, no.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'll. There's a little caveat there. I think Jordan Peele's great with all of the fake horror moments where, someone's. I think it's Angel is working in the tech store, and just his coworker comes up behind him and scares him. Those things are put everywhere, and there's a wonderful scene where the neighbors from Jupiter's Claim, Richie's Ranch, prank OJ, as well as OJ who's in the barn looking for
Yeah.
all these scary sounds are happening, the lights are going off. All that stuff is great, and then they appear as these little aliens, and that was a really freaky moment because we were thinking, okay, they're going to show us the monsters, and they turn out to be these kind of dwarf-like, funny, classic, generic kind of aliens, and it turns out that they're the kids. Yeah, they're the kids from next door just pranking them, and I thought that was great. So I think those moments are scarier than the big moments. Obviously, when this monster's vomiting up blood and all these things that it can't digest, and some of the scenes where the people are inside the intestines of the monster, and the screaming, a lot of that is really, really good. So I did like that. But ultimately, it's funny because the creature itself, it sort of becomes this big, unscary origami octopus parachute kind of thing, and it's just not frightening. And I think there's something about the anatomy of the being, the creature, that doesn't work in the sense that you see it getting sucked up in the insides, and it looks like you're in this big intestine, and it seems really scary that people are sort of suffocating as they're being eaten alive. But then when you see it it's a shapeshifter kind of thing. It's sort of this disc with a little hole. It's almost like a sand dollar. It's like an enormous sand dollar with this little hole for a mouth. And it kind of doesn't add up for me somehow. It's like I'm watching one creature that really does frighten me, but it's on the inside. And then the creature itself, even later in the film, on the outside, it's not that scary. It's actually quite beautiful. And then it has these kind of square boxes made out of parachuting material that come out to get closer and closer to some of the victims as it eats them. It's a hard monster to be scared of, in my opinion.
I thought the monster design was tremendously successful because it really made me feel it captured that tone of kind of cosmic horror. I was open mouthed watching the monster because a UFO with little green men inside it, that I can comprehend and understand. But there was something simply incomprehensible.
Yeah.
It felt clearly like it was supposed to be transdimensional or somehow breaking the laws of physics.
Yeah.
How could this creature fly and then sort of transform and flip itself inside out?
Yeah.
The way that it starts out, it looks like it disguises itself as a cloud, and then it looks like an eye or a camera.
Yep.
And then when it kind of opens itself up, it looks like an old sort of Victorian box camera or something like this, with this this sort of flicking shutter movement from this central mechanism inside it. And it looks like, is it a machine? Is it just sort of surrounded itself with fluttering paper? Is this actually the creature itself? Are we seeing? I mean, it really feels that little unnaturally square inside the creature feels like a doorway into somewhere else.
Yeah.
It just feels utterly unknowable. It feels completely incomprehensible.
Yeah.
Which is what cosmic horror is supposed to be. I thought from that point of view, having seen so many CGI monsters with tentacles in films over the last 15 years, for somebody to come up with a monster design which is just truly unique and incomprehensible is a proper achievement, actually. So I loved the monster. I did find it sort of chilling. Yeah, maybe frightening is not the word, but kind of chilling.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. But like Otis's or OJ's reactions are always so calm. He comes across as this I don't know, this terrible mistake in screenwriting, which is like a passive protagonist. We always talk about, you've got to be acting, got to be doing stuff. And he is just so chill, so relaxed, nonplussed, calm, and never gets too worked up about death or the monster, even when he's on the verge of being swallowed by it. So I like, in some ways I really liked it. It was refreshing. It was almost like telling people not to run around if there's a bee on them. You got to stay calm, calm. And he does that. But I don't know that's, it doesn't make him a super strong or active protagonist. They're definitely using their wits when they put together this plan to capture, at least film it, right? They're not necessarily out to destroy it in the early going.
They just want to capture an image.
And the final destruction is hilarious. I love the big balloon cowboy going up, and I guess it's got helium in it, so it blows up inside the monster. But I don't think that was ever an intention. That's sort of Emerald sort of riffing at the last moment. She's escaped from their ranch onto the Jupiter's Claim ranch, and she comes up with that idea, and it works perfectly. But he also says something. He says, "Don't look it in the eyes," and I got kind of confused by this because he's saying that that's the message. The thing's not going to eat you if you don't look it in the eyes. But it seems like it swallows everything kind of indiscriminately at the same time. And I know you mentioned the thing about that Ricky was feeding it horses, and I don't. That was never explicit to me. There's that one show that he's trying to put on to reveal the monster. And he's got a horse there, I guess, ready to be eaten. But even a horse wouldn't look it in the eyes, I don't think, right? So, I mean, I don't know if it's what that.
Good point. I wonder. Yeah, I don't know.
It's a rule, point. There's a rule. If that's the rule, then it has to be kind of consistent. So it probably wouldn't eat a horse if the horse didn't look it in the eyes. And there are a couple moments where you have horses looking into mirrors and OJ learning some things. But it's not a rule that's really consistent. So, I mean, like all the nickels and dimes and farm equipment that it's swallowing up whole, none of those things are looking it in the eyes. It seems just to sort of vacuum stuff up and then spit things out. Like it's after the fact, it's thinking, oh, did that thing look me in the eyes? I'm gonna eat it. If it didn't look me in the eyes, I mean, I'm gonna spit it out or whatever. I don't know. So there's some rules that just don't really apply consistently throughout the film.
Yeah. I'm going to ask. I'm interested to know what your answer to this will be. Were you aware of Jordan Peele before Get Out?
No, I know he has a lot of writing credits and a lot of experience before that. But I think Get Out was the first. I think more television before.
And Get Out kind of came out. I think it was advertised even in the UK as being a film from Jordan Peele, as if I was supposed to know who Jordan Peele was. And I think my understanding is that he's done kind of like sitcom or sketch.
Yeah, great sketch stuff. Yep.
In the US, and I don't think any of that has really made it over to the UK.
Oh, okay.
But I tell you what I do think about Jordan Peele. So I've only seen Get Out. I haven't seen Us. I've seen this now.
Yep.
But I actually think he's got a lot going for him as a screenwriter because he really, really knows how to work a theme. Because I feel like this film is so like heavy and insistent on its themes. Never a moment goes by without him stamping those themes again and again. The theme of is kind of gaze, isn't it? That it's about some surveillance. The mere fact that the characters react to this threat of an alien by wanting to film it, wanting to capture it, but wanting to look at it. That's the modern reaction to everything. This whole idea of looking away in the same way that if you are a black man, I mean, this is what this made me think of. Then the police come by, the sensible action is just look at the floor, look over there, don't make eye contact because they're going to pull you over. The way that he kind of focuses on Daniel Kaluuya's eyes, the way that he's even kind of lit some of those scenes, so really you almost can't see anything except his eyes. And like the sort of the camera-like form of the monster, the guy who turns up on the motorcycle, who's got that helmet which looks also just like the monster. It's got this single gaping
Cyclops,
eye. And even the scene from Ricky's sitcom, which I was struggling to connect to the rest of the film for most of the movie. So we have this kind of quite long sort of flashback to Ricky as a child watching terrified underneath a tablecloth as the chimp in his sitcom beats up the other cast members, and it's a very violent, bloody, terrifying scene. And then just at the end, the chimp spots him under the tablecloth but doesn't attack him. And I think the reason it doesn't attack him is because when he's partly hidden by the tablecloth, it interrupts his gaze. So they kind of can't make eye contact, and it's the eye contact that frightens the chimp. The way that I think it's just kind of very skillful, the way that he's managed to work this theme into pretty much every segment of the film, and to kind of work it and dig it in and make it absolutely part of the fabric of every scene. So I think from that point of view, tremendous thematic consistency. It did leave me thinking slightly, with all that heavy working of the theme, what is the film actually about? It can't really just be a film about looking. And I was trying to figure out, is it just that sometimes we fear what we can see more than we fear what we cannot see? Or is he trying to suggest that to capture something on film is to tame it? Holst, the photographer, whenever we see him at home when he answers phone calls, he's editing these films of real wild animals in Mortal Kombat. And there's something about taming nature by capturing its image. I think that's kind of what the film is about, but I'm not really sure what it's saying about that notion, whether it's saying it's folly or not.
I was hoping you'd tell me, because in my notes right here it says, "What the hell is it really about?" So I have to admit, I think a lot of the gaze stuff escaped me. So I don't know that it's about that. It's a good hypothesis, I guess. But yeah, I really struggled with this film a lot, and in part because the thing that I thought was the best was the Gordy's Home stuff. So Gordy's Home was the sitcom that Ricky was in, and I think it gets maybe 3 or 4 beats in the whole film. It opens with it, and this is why the film is quite confusing to me. It opens with this, which is the best stuff in the film. It is gory, it's bloody, it's deadly. He comes back to it a couple times when it ends up being sort of flashbacks or backstory for someone who ends up being a minor character. It's definitely not one of the leads.
Yeah.
But Jordan Peele spends 3 or 4 significant beats on it, and I think you've attached it pretty well, is that because he can't look him in the eye, the chimpanzee doesn't kill him, because he kills basically the rest of the cast and clears the audience out of there. So that's the connection to the story, but otherwise it doesn't really support the main story that well. And for me, that was a letdown, but just because I thought that was the most striking stuff in the film, those 3 or 4 moments. So it adds up to about, 5 minutes tops in a 2-hour and 11-minute film, something like that. So,
I mean, all that Gordy's Home stuff you could cut from the film, and it would, nobody would notice.
No, you wouldn't notice a thing.
It
and
makes
it's interesting,
no difference to get to the story.
You get more backstory on Ricky than you do on OJ, on Emerald. I mean, it's a real. You're kind of wrong-footing the audience quite a bit, and as a result, I spent so much time trying to connect that to the rest of the film that. Yeah, the gaze stuff is there, but it's almost in every movie and in everything in our lives these days, because we're so visual to begin with. You can't not be on, camera phones these days, or surveillance cameras, right? So I mean, that's kind of like built into our DNA at this point.
I suppose the other connecting strand is that the chimpanzee Gordy is frightened by a balloon, isn't he? So like one of the characters in the show opens this box, and it's full of helium balloons which float up into the sky and burst, and that's what panics him and makes him go into kind of sort of panic mode and kill the other cast members. Yeah. So I guess having the balloon come back at the end of the movie and having that kind of same beat but writ massive in the sky, I suppose that kind of ties those two things together. But it feels almost like an elaborate gag rather than some kind of thematic link.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't think it's that strong a link anyway. I mean, I think you've done some great work there to put together the themes, and you've noticed all that sort of that gazing. But I still struggle with the film because it wasn't that scary per se. So I put it down as a horror film, not super scary, and I don't think it's that clear on what it wants to be about. And I may have missed the point entirely. But there were some things I loved about. I really loved the story world stuff. I love this old Hollywood kind of stuff, and the fact that these horse trainers are thinking about stealing some ideas from another minor theme park nearby, and they're doing business with each other, and I liked a lot of that. But I was kind of just in nowheresville somehow on this film. I just didn't know where the hell I was supposed to be, what I was supposed to be paying attention to, and it's all done very very competently. It's a well-made film, certainly. A huge budget, obviously. Or a huge crew and cast. It's just enormous in that way. If you stick around and watch the credits, it goes on and on. So there's a lot of there'll be a lot of CGI going on here, but a lot of money put into it.
I guess for a contemporary horror film, it's quite refreshing that it leans much more on this kind of sense of dread for scares than it does on just jump scares.
Yeah.
There are kind of very few moments where somebody suddenly kind of jumps out on screen. Mm-hmm. But he's quite good, I think, at stringing out this kind of gradual, gutsy fear that builds and builds.
Yeah.
And he's kind of good at that. And there's one other thing I was going to say, which I admired about his writing, is just the way that the opening works. Not the opening with Gordy's home, but the kind of the opening proper, where you see OJ and his dad Otis,
Yeah.
just starting their day on the ranch, and OJ is kind of feeding the horses, and then kind of starts them on this kind of little walk around machine to give them a bit of exercise, and Otis makes a few kind of slightly oblique comments, and then kind of Otis is killed by this falling coin. And I can think of many films where that scene would feature a bit of dialogue between the two characters, where Otis was saying, well, son, I've run this ranch for 50 years using these horses for Hollywood movies, and I've done all the great movies, but these days are coming to an end, and you're going to have to take over this farm. Am I, Dad? Yeah, you sure are. Yeah. But there's no scene like that. Instead, it's very oblique. It feels very kind of slice of life. It shows some real proper confidence and control, and I think those kinds of scenes were really good. In the same way that I found quite a bit of the dialogue in the film difficult to hear, and I don't think it mattered, because the story comes across without you really being able to hear this kind of the mumbled dialogue. Yeah, you hear the bits that you really have to hear, but the rest of it you can easily fill in for yourself. Yeah, so I think from the point of view of writing, I haven't seen the script, but from the point of view of the writing that made its way onto the screen, I think this is a really pretty terrifically written film for 2022.
Yeah, definitely a sign of a good film if you don't need to hear the dialogue to understand it and to follow it pretty well. Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that there was something about the sound. It just didn't look like it was re-recorded particularly well or mixed particularly well, and you had some mumbling actors too, I think. Like the grizzled DP, the director of photography, who comes in to help them out. I didn't understand anything he said, and I think that was characterization, is what I assumed. Like, this is a guy who's just mumbling. He's watching one animal eat another one on television all day long, and then he finally decides to get involved to help them out. So I'm thinking that was probably characterization to a certain extent. But
throughout all of his scenes, it's Michael Wincott, isn't it, that plays that character? And throughout all of his scenes, I was thinking, just clear your throat, cough, come on, just cough it up.
Yeah. Oh God, it was pretty fun. And there are some funny moments. I think that's kind of par for the course with a Peele film, is that you're going to have some funny moments at kind of almost uncomfortably gory times or scary times. You start laughing. But the real gore is really in the sitcom replays. It's not, other than seeing like these rainfalls of blood and debris from the creature. You're not seeing people get decapitated or stabbed or beat up. It's really gory only in the sitcom, and even that is mostly off screen, but really well implied, I would say.
Yeah. So I think it's a 15 certificate in the UK.
Okay.
So there is and my children were asking me about it, and I was kind of saying, I think this film is probably too scary for you, although you don't see a great deal of very explicit gore. But the level of violence that is implied or that happens just off screen is pretty extreme. It's very violent.
I find it funny that I said, I think the last podcast we were talking about too much violence. I was saying, oh God, everyone's getting their necks snapped or they're being impaled by this or that. And then in this film, I thought, boy, that was good blood. I want more of that. I wanted more of Gordy's home. So, hypocrite.
There's one last thing I would kind of ask you about. So in the Gordy's home section, the camera and the actors kind of focus on this sort of strange magical moment that one of the characters is being beaten up. Their shoe has been left, so it's been resting kind of like heel down, pointing straight up at the sky. And like that's the thing that Ricky the boy really focuses on, this weird like sort of magical moment, like a coin that's been tossed and has landed on its edge. Yeah. And I was trying to figure out, is that just like a weird tiny little bit of detail? Or is there something, deeper, or something that is referencing which I don't get? Because I saw that and I thought that was kind of interesting and magical and strange, and quite human to focus on this sort of bizarre detail in amongst this bloody panic. Yeah. But I wondered whether there was something there that that would be obvious to other people in the audience that I just didn't get.
Yeah, I think the way I read it was it's a question of like what is real. When you're putting together a sitcom, there's nothing real. That looked like one of these totally artificial sitcoms. So there's nothing real. And then when this chimpanzee goes nuts and starts killing people, things get real really fast. So I think that sort of connects to the other story in the sense like, are these creatures real or is this something that's completely unreal? And Peele gives you that shoe. Maybe you remember this when Ricky shows them. He's got this sort of closet of memorabilia of all these
Right,
Gordy Stone
yeah.
things, and that shoe is on the wall, hung like a piece of art. And it kind of makes sense there because you don't know that it's standing up on end until later on. It makes sense that a piece of art is hanging like that. So of course it's going to stand up on end. But when you see it in the sort of recreation of the sitcom, it's just sitting there in the middle of the rug on the floor, unnaturally standing up on end. So it comes back. He does sort of set it up a little bit, and then it comes back to show you. But it is interesting. It's real detail. And for me, it was just like, something's not right. There's something wrong. There's something unreal about this whole moment. And I think that kind of connects to the story. Like, why is this monster parked over our little valley trying to eat everything around here? And I was looking, is there a karma story? Did Ricky do something, and that's why he's being eaten up, and why that whole area is being terrorized by the creature? But I had a hard time putting it all together. I really did.
Gosh, do you think maybe the shoe is a clue that the film kind of doesn't quite happen in the real world? Well, there's something just a little bit sort of dreamlike and a little bit off kilter and just a little bit off center about it. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
That passed me by.
Mm.
Good picture, I think. So refreshing to be surprised by a big budget horror film. Wasn't I think I was aware that there was a bit of spaciness going on, or maybe something to do with aliens, but
Yeah.
I largely managed to avoid spoilers, unlike listeners of this pod, and I was pleasantly surprised. It didn't turn out the way that I was expecting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the trailers managed to give away very little. So yeah, $68 million of interesting surprise.
Yeah.
Worth going to see.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's have a break, and then we will come back and we will talk about another science fiction film, Brother from Another Planet. We're back in a minute. So, Andres, tell me, what do you think is really missing from the world of film and television? What do we really need?
Heroes like John Wayne, Cary Grant.
No, that's definitely not what we need. What we really need is a brand new internet film and television streaming service, because there just aren't nearly enough of them. So I'm pleased to say, after many months of negotiation, we will be launching our own television streaming service in the autumn. Really exciting. It's going to be called Two Real Cinema Club Plus. It's going to be full of the content that you and your family can't wait to watch. We're going to have original programming, including Better Call Jeff, which is a bit like Better Call Saul, but it's mostly me on the phone to my friend Jeff. We'll have retro science fiction series Unusual Things. There's a very exciting original show, which is a combination of the excitement of Game of Thrones and the intrigue of House of Cards. We're calling it Game of Cards, and it's going to be mostly you and me playing a game of cards. But not just original shows. They're going to be documentaries like Photos of My Cat, which is an hour of me showing you photos of my cat. And there's going to be feature-length films as well, like the public domain Introduction to Windows 95 VHS Tape 2. So all sorts of content that you won't be able to see anywhere else apart from YouTube. And will all be presented to you in a unique interface, which will show you random content that you don't want to watch, or it will recommend you things that you've already watched and don't want to see again. But not only are we launching a television streaming service that will have basically nothing that you want to watch, but we're using that as a feature, not a bug. The value of having a streaming service for only $15 a month that shows you nothing that you want to watch is that you won't waste hours of every evening trying to figure out what you're going to watch that evening and arguing with other family members about what you're going to watch because there's nothing to watch.
It's good. That's
and
good.
our guarantee to our subscribers, if you do find something that you like, we promise that we will take it off the service without warning in about 48 hours. So that's TRCC Plus, $15 a month, coming this autumn. Get on it.
I like it. Hey, but does that mean that my plans for TRCC minus are just for naught? Or could we could take the content from TRCC Plus that doesn't work, we could put it on my service, TRCC minus, yeah?
And if you subscribe twice, you could get both services, and we'll just call it zero.
TRCC even. Oh, I love it. I'm looking forward to that. That's streaming this fall, you say?
This fall.
$15. That's great. Welcome back, everyone. Our second feature that we're going to discuss today is The Brother from Another Planet, which I, for years, thought was just called Brother from Another Planet, but it is The Brother, huh? It's got that definite article at the beginning. Written, directed by John Sayles, who's sort of a godfather of the American independent film movement, and a lot of his regulars are in the film, or at least a couple of them are. I also had the year wrong. It was 1984. I thought this was a 90s film, so I was way off base going into this viewing. Made for about $350,000, which is actually, boy, that's a lot of money back then in my mind. And
I guess so. I don't know. I felt that it looked quite studenty. I felt like, $350,000 kind of looked sort of fairly fair. But yeah.
It does not have the production values of a $350,000 film. Boy, of that time or of now. I mean, now you could make a pretty good film for that money, I think, just because the gear is so good. But he's definitely working on film in the mid-'80s. Takes place in New York City, and it's all from the perspective of a black alien or an alien who comes to Earth as a black man. The opening, it jumps right in. There's some like shaky camera and screaming, similar to Nope, where the screaming is really effective, actually. You hear all these voices. But then you have these steel drums, which kind of are odd. Steel drum solo bits. All of this kind of signifies an alien crash. It's really quite low budget. You don't see a ship or anything like that. Everything's just kind of implied. And frighteningly, he lands without a lower leg, as like from the knee down. His right leg is just bleeding, and he does not look in good shape. He's hobbling around quite a bit. He, for some reason, he either lands on Ellis Island, which is a major port of immigration in New York City, or he gets there somehow. And I think the significance is that he sort of lands as an immigrant, and you hear these sort of screams of Babel in there, just all these different languages. It's all like the ghosts of all the immigrants who've come through Ellis Island are with him, and that's a pretty effective use of audio, I thought.
Is it still a port of immigration in New York, Ellis Island?
It's not. It's a museum, I believe.
Right.
It's not far from the island that houses the Statue of Liberty.
Okay.
So I think it's a museum of immigration now. Most of the ports now are really the airport terminals and shipping terminals. Yeah,
of course,
and streamlined that way.
I forgot about the invention of the airplane there. Sorry.
Yeah, like almost 100 years now, something like that. The commercial ones, anyway. This is, at times, it's sort of an absurd comedy, but a lot of Sayles' pieces are really moral plays, I guess. I think of him that way. He's a very, like an activist, leftist filmmaker, and I think a lot of his values come out in his films. And then he usually throws in some comedy to lighten it up a little bit. The alien, or I guess we should call him the brother. I keep calling him the alien, but he's really the brother from another planet. He sort of regrows the foot overnight, but it has 3 or 4 toes and a talon, or talons on them. Yeah, so he's obviously identified by his this physical feature. He finds some shoes pretty early on to hide this. But he's really he stands out as it is. And the story is really about him trying to assimilate into the city. He has trouble with the law immediately. He has to steal food. He needs money. He gets a little bit freaked out by Jesus Christ when he walks into a church, which I thought was kind of interesting because he has these healing powers. There's not much detail, but if he puts his
Yeah.
hand to anything, he can sort of produce sound and light. And usually he's fixing a child's wound or a television. He gets a job fixing old arcade games. And later on, he uses powers to steal a car. So he definitely has powers that we might think of as being alien.
He seems to have the powers of ET, basically, doesn't he?
He sort of does,
Has
yeah.
like
And
has kind of glowing hand, yeah, which has multiple uses.
yeah. And E.T.'s what, 2 years before this? Maybe 81 or 82 is E.T. So, that was the hot thing, was to have healing powers with light.
And my understanding actually is that John Sayles wrote like the original treatment that became ET.
Oh, that I did not know. That would be
Yeah,
interesting.
I think so. Yeah, interestingly.
Yeah, he's definitely, I think he's been a script doctor a little bit. He's known for his writing, but started making films probably late 70s. I think I was looking at his IMDb.
Something like that.
The Return of the Secaucus 7, I think, is his first big-ish film, probably first feature, and that's maybe 77 or 78, I think. It might be,
Right, okay.
Might be 1980, somewhere around there. So he's the protagonist. It's his story. It's the brother's story, but he is being chased by some folks who look like Earthlings, but I don't know that they are. They're sort of precursors to the Men in Black. They literally wear black. And in thinking about it and then reading about it later, I guess they're bounty hunters maybe from his planet, but they want to come back and get the brother and take him away. And they're kind of goofy, but they seem very dangerous. And they are played by John Sayles, the director, and David Strathairn, who's been in a bunch of his films and has gone on to be a pretty big actor.
Yeah.
And people, they're people in. This is a very multicultural film. I think it's intentionally very inclusive. And so John Sayles gives everyone certain manners of dress or really different speech patterns, and he often gives people long monologues that characterize them really well. So they're minor characters who get some good screen time in this, and it's sort of exploring. I think the idea is you're exploring New York City as this land of so many different people and so many different cultures, and that comes through in a lot of the dialogue. But the alien or the brother has no idea what this culture is about. He sees a dog tied up outside a grocery store, and he unties it and frees it, so he doesn't realize that you leave your dog tied up so that it doesn't run into traffic. Or he buys a record album at one point because he's attracted to the woman on the packaging, and he sort of throws away the recording. That's not of interest to him. The packaging and then the liner notes and the picture are the important thing. So he's well characterized. He does not speak a word in this film. Played by, is it Joe Morton?
Joe Morton, yeah.
Joe Morton plays it beautifully. So it's a very expressionistic kind of thing where he really just has to use gestures and movements to communicate. He's not allowed to speak English, but he is allowed to understand it, which is kind of strange. So even though he's there for a while, he never even says hello. You'd think he might pick up that. So it's this sort of this convenient
he doesn't have
device.
vocal cords, something like that. So actually, it's just not possible for him to vocalize.
It's not explained, but it is very convenient, I think, for John Sayles, because that way he doesn't have to have this creature speak at all. And this film's kind of shot like a play in many ways. There's very little camera movement. So you very often have long shots with dialogue sections, but at the same time, it's very visual because your protagonist is not speaking at all. So it has some interesting elements of both, I think, cinema and theater. And there's a lot of talking. It is definitely a talkie. I think talkies are generally kind of cheaper to do than these big epic kind of shots. I mean, there's more dialogue, I think, for a reason. I think he's still working on minimal resources here. By the end of Act One, he's sort of become part of a community of these sort of barflies in Harlem. So there are these 4 black men. There's the bartender and a couple of grizzled old drinkers who sort of take him in. Even though he can't talk, they sort of start to protect him, and they care for him. They find out, get him a place to live, and even get him into a job. So he's definitely a fish out of water. That's what the whole idea of this film.
Right.
Sayles and Strathairn, actually, the Men in Black, they're looking for him. They enter the bar. They put some pressure on the alien, and they get the barflies, the men in there, kind of worked up a little bit. But the funny thing about them as dangerous characters or antagonists is they're not very menacing, and they kind of disappear for 10 and 20 minutes, 30 minutes at a time. So they don't have a lot of scenes, and they're not that dangerous, and that makes the tension pretty light because you get the feeling they're not going to ever get at him or do him any harm. But they are just kind of creepy because they're very, very weird characters, and they border on the comic all the time. So, let's see. So I think they're definitely commentaries on race and what it's like to be black in America, and this is 40 years ago, so it's sad that we're still struggling with some of these things. But that's definitely on his mind. It's not. I don't think it's just race. I think he's also talking about different cultures and people coming from different places, and the immigrant experience in general. Right about the middle, there's this odd love scene where he falls for this singer. Her image is all over the city, and she's in record stores, and that's the record that he buys. But she's really playing in this one very small, sad nightclub. So she's billed as a superstar, but it's really quite a basic club where she's playing, and he has very good access to her. So they actually, he befriends her. He befriends a lot of people, even though he never says anything. There's this one pair of guys from Indiana who get lost in Harlem, and they just fall in love with him. They just sit there at the bar where the brother hangs out with his friends in the bar. And they say, hey, if people would sit down and talk and communicate, there wouldn't be any problems in the world. And he's never said a word to these guys, but he's bringing people together somehow. And then there's a strange turn where he has this bizarre drug experience. It's heroin, I believe, and this chap who had robbed him earlier and this young boy sort of resurface, and the young boys had a heroin overdose, but the brother picks up the needle. I think it's the same needle that the kid used when he overdosed and died. The brother basically goes on a heroin trip and kind of passes out, but this sort of Jamaican messiah, he just keeps talking nonstop about the condition of humans in New York City. It's sort of this street poetry. And he sort of saves the brother as he's going on and on about the human condition. They smoke some weed to recover. And then all of a sudden the brother normalizes. He's in a museum with this young boy he's living with. The film gets a little bit random as a collection of scenes, but I guess it's showing his assimilation into the whole city. But the agents sort of reappear, and they're chasing him down at the bar and looking for him, and apparently taking him back to his planet or whatnot. But again, Sayles gives everyone some chance to offer some perspective. So the brother at one time sits down next to a police officer, and the police officer gives him his opinion on life and the world. And there's a scene in an office where a disaffected older black woman, she gets her chance to talk about the system and how it's cheating her, and then the white guys from Indiana. So you're always getting these other perspectives. So it's interesting because just by moving through the world, the brother sort of brings out attitudes or opinions from other people, and Sayles gives them a chance to air their opinions. And I think one of the amazing things about this Sayles film is that he nails the dialogue. I mean, he's writing for people from all sorts of different cultures, and there's some long passages where they're just talking and talking, but it's very well written, and the stuff is very well delivered. So it is impressive. I generally don't want to talk too much about talking in films, but it's pretty well done in this film. Sort of a late surprise is the graffiti. I don't know if you caught this, but there's this graffiti that the brother can sort of understand, and he's so desperate to communicate people with the graffiti that he cuts his own hand and writes responses to the graffiti in blood. It's a really nice touch. It's a little underdeveloped. It does sort of come back at the end and make some sense, but
yeah, I was mystified when that happened. In fact, I think I've only really understood the meaning of that scene just now when you have explained it. And I've suddenly realized, now I get it.
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
That kind of went right over my head.
Yeah, so I think as soon as I saw it, I thought, okay, it's E.T. Phone Home, isn't it? He's he's seeing this graffiti. He can understand it. He wants to contact the people, so he starts writing back in his blood, which is a little gross. But he also is he wants to hunt down the man who stole from him and whose buddy died on the overdose. And he uses, this is crazy, he uses his removable eyeball So the brother has this eyeball that he can use sort of as a camera. So he plants it in an outdoor pot of a flower pot, and it's surveilling this house so that he can find out what's going on. And it allows him to sort of follow the money, I guess. He's trying to figure out who's selling drugs to whom and how it's all happening. And so he starts following one of the guys who hangs out in the bar, Prescott, who's seemingly involved in the drug trade somehow. Or he certainly had contact with the young guy who was stealing and then using the drugs. It looked a lot like cocaine ultimately when you see it, but I think they were calling it heroin. I don't want to go too much into that. I mean, that's probably a small detail, but he's able to track the sort of the business down to this real estate mogul. He gets into this building, and the real estate guy is at the top of this skyscraper at his desk, and the brother walks in, and he sort of he takes the eyeball. Yes. And he puts it up to I guess the real estate mogul is allowed he can see what was on the camera eyeball by looking at it, and he sees his wrongdoing because he sees the boy overdose on the drugs. And the brother doesn't beat him up or anything like that. He just shows him what he's doing and what havoc and what harm he's doing to his community. And I guess the tycoon's kind of scared straight a little bit, perhaps.
But then after that, the brother takes the bag of white powder.
Yeah.
And like we get a POV shot of him pushing the bag of, like, this plastic bag of white powder, like, over the camera lens.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So I was thinking, is he forcing the guy to overdose?
I guess that's
Is he asphyxiating him with the bag? Or I didn't quite understand what happened there. I got the impression that the guy who was the drug kingpin came to a sticky end in that scene, even though it wasn't explicitly proven.
Like a forced overdose. Yeah, that's possible. I do remember
that's what I interpreted it as.
Oh, okay. So he does. So it seems to be like he wants to avenge this death, and he's sort of going all over the city to try and do it, and he does manage to do it. So that would make sense. Yeah. So he's forced the tycoon to take his own drugs and die by his own medicine, I guess. Yeah. Meanwhile, the men in black are tracking him down. They go to the bar in Harlem. There's this fight with all the barflies there, and the brother escapes. And if you know New York City geography, this scene doesn't make a lot of sense because he gets downtown and deals with the real estate mogul after that, and then gets back up to the bar in no time. So it's like, I want to be on his subway cars when I'm in New York City, because that's not how
in real life, that's like an hour and a half journey or something.
Easily, each way. And, not only does he make the trip, but the guys who are chasing him also get on some fast trains too. So well done for them. But the men in black sort of eventually track the brother down in the night. He starts to see the graffiti, and so the graffiti comes back, and he's able to lead them in a certain direction where there are other brothers and sisters. So they're all black, and again, probably aliens, but I don't know if they're black aliens or they're just in their alien form takes on black bodies. I'm not really sure what happened there, but they are there. It's not a formidable group on numbers or muscle. There's some women, there's some men. It's maybe 20 people, but the men in black, who had just beaten the crap out of everybody in the bar and seemed like unbeatable, they decided to just not fight. It's very convenient. They check out. I couldn't tell if they were beaming up to their planet or if there was some sort of joint suicide, but these guys who didn't bat an eye at beating up all these other guys and doing very well in the bar fight, they kind of walk away from confrontation here. It's not terribly clear, but I think they do like a fist bump, or they put their hands together in such a way, and then they beam out.
Yeah.
And then the closing image, I really need your explanation on this. The brother takes the A train, so he's on the subway after he always points up as if I'm going to outer space, and then one of the other brothers points down, and that means subway, I guess. So he arrives at a Harlem school. I think maybe it was a prison. It was really odd, but he's on the fence outside a building with a big lot, and on the wall of the building it says Harlem plays the best ball in the country, which I think is basketball. And then brother turns and smiles directly at the camera, and that's kind of where it ends. It's a little bit ambiguous. It looks like he's going to stay on the planet. I couldn't tell why he was going to that place in Harlem.
I thought after he sleeps with the nightclub singer, like after that scene, and he puts his clothes back on, and she says, "Oh, you were wild in bed, honey, and see you around."
Yeah.
And while he is on his way to the next story beat, which is he spots the drug dealers, he passes a couple of guys playing basketball.
Okay.
And one of his alien superpowers, he's incredibly good at basketball.
Ah, there you go.
And he scores a hoop from 30 yards out or something like that. And so I was guessing that at the end of the movie we're supposed to think, he's going to go and become a professional basketball player, and that's how he's going to settle in on the Earth.
Okay.
I think that's what that means. It's like this little kind of just a little gag at the end. And then he becomes a basketball player.
Okay. There you go.
That's what I think it is.
He does smile.
But again, I don't think I quite realised that until you were explaining it to me now. Because I don't think I could quite read what it said on the building at the end of the movie properly.
I think I paused it, looked. I had to make out best, I think. Oh, no, I couldn't tell if it was best or something. Other word, ball. Is it the next ball or the best? It's the best ball in the country. So Harlem plays the best ball in the country. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the film in part because it just reminded me of being a younger guy, I guess.
I really loved that 80s New York kind of fashion and hair.
Absolutely,
and just like that. I mean, it did feel like a 90-minute Grandmaster Flash video.
Yes.
Absolutely that kind of feel with all the kind of guys sitting on the stoop and like the clothes and the attitude and, even like, the colors really kind of felt reminiscent of, and and this, I visited New York with a friend in 1988, I think. So 4 years after this film was, and we were kind of two sort of weedy English white guys, so we weren't exactly kind of, getting down with Grandmaster Flash, but I still, quite fondly remember, those haircuts, those clothes, that period of New York history.
And the music too takes you back to that era instantly. Even if the music's not necessarily good, it definitely evokes the times. And for me, I just thought immediately of Desperately Seeking Susan, film from the 80s with Madonna, as well as...
That was probably also 1984.
It was about that same time, yeah.
I think so, yeah.
And then the other one was... After Hours, which is one of my favorite Martin Scorsese films. So I was just immediately brought right back there. And John Sayles is kind of the godfather of all those independent filmmakers that come, in the 90s and after. So, I mean, I think he's just, he's given us a pretty good film there. And, I think it stands up pretty well. Definitely, I mean, it's very 80s. It's definitely that era. But
it's a good 80s.
Yeah, and, again, sadly, some of the themes of multiculturalism and race are still with us today. So
absolutely,
it's definitely still relevant.
Absolutely, it feels embarrassing to watch the film made from 1984, and, as if one would travel back to 1984 and say, hi, I'm a visitor from the space year 2022. Oh yeah, we haven't sorted any of this stuff out yet. I'm sorry. In fact, it's a bit worse.
Yeah.
There are like a bunch of great scenes. It does feel like a collection of scenes at times, more than a single coherent through line. Yeah. But those individual scenes, many of them, just joyous. There's a little scene where he sees a magic trick on the subway. And this guy just does this really clever little trick with a pack of cards. Yeah. And the brother, has never seen a pack of cards before and doesn't know how to cut a deck or anything. So, so the guy kind of cuts the deck for him and continues with the trick. And it's just a lovely little slice of life. I was in exactly the same position like about 2 weeks ago that I'd been recording a radio show, and I got the train back into town with another guy who's also a guest on the show, who is like a close-up magician. This guy was while we were sitting on the train, he just got out a pack of cards and started doing tricks for like other people on the train. And I felt like, watching A Brother from Another Planet, I felt like, I lived this moment 2 weeks ago. There's another kind of great scene that I really enjoyed, which is in the arcade. Mm-hmm. There's a girl who plays the arcade games, and she's complaining that they're not fast enough. Yeah. So like the brother, he overclocks the arcade machine using his magical hand. Yeah. But the way that it's filmed, it's filmed like a sex scene, because he's got his kind of hand on the machine, and he's kind of speeding it up, but he's kind of keeping eye contact with her. Yeah. And then she is playing the game as it gradually gets faster and faster, and she's kind of really enjoying it. And then she's twiddling this joystick around, which is very subtle symbolism.
Not at all.
And it's just like, they're both of their kind of growing pleasure. It's like, her excitement, and then his kind of pleasure at seeing her excited. Yeah. It's just a really sort of sweet. It's like it's like the 3 camera setups. Really simple, kind of couple of close-ups.
Yeah.
But clever, witty, really enjoyable, fun little scene. Really clever. I really like that.
Good.
And then the kind of the nighttime tour of the drug dens after he shoots up, and then you get this little slice of life again where the camera just looks at at people who've taken drugs and they're kind of just like lying on mattresses in the road, or it's kind of shocking, but also it's humane, and it's not trying to not really trying to judge even, or at least it's kind of offering people as victims rather than to be blamed. And it's it's nicely filmed.
Yes, and his Jamaican rescuer just goes on and on and on talking about it, sort of commentating on everything they see. It makes it surreal. It's a very surreal scene, but yeah, again, very real in New York City at the time.
Have you seen a lot of John Sayles' pictures?
I think I have, yeah, for sure. Not all of them, and he hasn't been active in the last, or so active in the last 10 or 12 years, I'd say, but... I
mean, he's in his 70s now, isn't he, I think?
Yeah, I think he's probably in his 70s. Probably, again, if he's doctoring scripts, then he might not, get credits that would go into IMDb or anything like that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I saw, certainly... was it Lone Star, the Texas film with Chris Cooper, Casa de los Babies, City of God, I think it's called. Yeah, I've seen a number of his films, yeah.
I think the only one I've knowingly seen is Limbo, which is another David Strathairn film.
Okay.
I think that's the only other John Sayles film I've seen, and it's a kind of a sweet slice of life film about a struggling community in Alaska. And then it's kind of like this guy and his brother, I think, are involved in a drug deal that goes wrong, and then like the guy and his kind of new girlfriend have to go kind of on the run, and they escape to this little island off the coast of Alaska. Yeah. And the very end of the movie sees like the guy and the girlfriend, and I think maybe her daughter. I think they're stranded on this little island, standing on the beach, and they can see a plane circling. Like a seaplane that's about to come into land. Yeah. And they know that the seaplane is either the police coming to rescue them, or it's the drug dealers coming to kill them.
Oh, God.
And they don't know who it is in the plane. And then the movie ends.
And he leaves you there, yeah.
Exactly, and it leaves you there. And I can understand that he's probably trying to make a film about being unsettled, and none of us know what the future holds. Yeah. But it did feel like a bit of a cheat, I must say, when I walked out of the cinema and I thought, wait a second, did the print break? Was there's another 10 minutes to come? Yeah, what happened?
Yeah. Well, I think he's a very earnest filmmaker. His values are all over his films, I think. And unlike Nope, we had to work a little bit, I think, to get at the themes. I think his themes are always really obvious and relevant, and he really does hammer them home. And to a fault, maybe there's more in the dialogue that helps him to do that, but I think his values are clear and his ideas are very clear in his films.
Do you think if John Sayles tried to make Brother from Another Planet today, he would be accused of kind of cultural tourism, or at least people would say, you're a white man in your 70s, why are you making a movie about the experience of being a black guy in New York?
Yeah. Great point. I think he would get it made. I think it would. This film still works.
It does still work.
Yeah, and for 1984, this is a white writer-director with a majority black cast. That's pretty impressive. Obviously in this day and age, you'd probably want to see a black filmmaker, a black writer get it done, but at least Sayles got it done. He's probably the kind of guy who would say, "Look, I've got this idea, but someone else should make the film." And I think that would be another way for him to make a film like this today. But it works. It works. I don't think there's any cultural appropriation necessarily. And he's very. There are Hispanic characters in there. There are like Midwestern white guys in there. He's intentionally touching on a lot of different cultures.
Yeah.
But I think what impressed me was that his dialogue was appropriate for every culture that he was exploring. I think that for me, that's a really hard thing to write, is just really write words that ring authentic in other people's voices, especially people who are just not like me. So I thought that was really well done. That was the thing that impressed me.
It's one of those movies where I feel like you get no points for noticing what the theme is, because, like you say, it's in every scene, isn't it? This notion of kind of community. Or at least it's like it's the interplay of community and alienation, isn't it?
Perfectly.
And kind of forcing one into the other.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, from that point of view, very skillfully written. I think he's achieved a lot with what still feels like a small budget,
Yeah.
and a very unstarry cast. The only kind of criticism I think I would come up with, which is something that I've kind of read about John Sayles before, which is that for all his great writing, he doesn't know where to put the camera.
Yeah. Yep.
And there are a few moments in this film where I'm kind of questioning. There's lots of kind of scenes where the camera kind of feels like it's only about 2 feet off the floor and it's looking up at all of the characters.
Yeah.
And I think could you not have just splashed out for a slightly bigger tripod? It's
Yeah.
like why is the camera so low in every scene?
The short pod. I can't imagine who would sell that or who would buy it. Yeah, literally no camera movement, and obviously no steady cam in 1984. And you set up dollies and tracking shots. It's going to cost you a lot more money. So I understood it, but he's not terribly imaginative. You can move the camera with a cut too. So and there's very little of that. There are a lot of scenes where he just pops a camera in and it becomes theatrical because it's just these characters talking. In the same camera angle for a minute or two in some cases. So yeah, I would agree with that.
I wonder whether The Brother from Another Planet is a film that's begging to get turned into a play. I think this would probably work perfectly well on stage.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I think he comes from a theater background. I think he sort of graduated from theater and that's in there. I mean, this is definitely stagey at times, and that. I think later on, I don't know yet, I assume he was his own director of photography on this thing. I think the later films are a little bit more interesting, and as the technology got more available, I think there's more camera movement. But this one, and then the Return of the Secaucus 7, same sort of thing. It feels very much like a bunch of college buddies who know a little bit about filmmaking, making a picture together.
So 2 films. It's about 38 years apart. Is that right? Is my maths right? 38 years apart, I think.
You are.
Kind of both about science fiction themes, alienation, struggles in society. Not a great deal has changed in 38 years. I could easily imagine somebody making The Brother from Another Planet today, and given the technology available, some version of Nope could have been made in 1984.
Yeah.
So once again, progress. Where are you?
Yeah.
Nowhere to be found.
Well, yeah, I think Nope, in terms of just the ubiquity of cameras and surveillance, it might be scarier if it was made in 1984 because we weren't accustomed to that. We weren't accustomed to being seen all the time. So.
Yeah.
That's the interesting wrinkle there, I think. But in terms of, as much CGI as there is in Nope, it doesn't depend on the technology to push the story, I don't think. I think it's much more about just that family getting together, getting back together. We don't know why they were separated before, the brother and sister, but seeing people come back together in order to battle something greater.
Yeah. And I think exactly the same thing happens at the end of Brother from Another Planet, doesn't it? Because I guess the brother, not only has he created, a bunch of proxy families for himself, but he also, finds his compatriots at the end to kind of defeat the bigger evil. So these films have a lot in common.
Yeah, they do.
Actually.
Good pairing. I was glad we saw them.
Yeah, I think they work as a double bill.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well
Pleasant
done.
surprise. Sometimes it works. Hey.
Well done, Two Real Cinema Club. You guys are great. That's the kind of feedback we get on the email all the time, the Twitter.
All the time, yeah. It's either that and spam. So this has been the Two Real Cinema Club. Do email us in and tell us how great we were this episode, and we will see you next time round for another great pairing.
Sounds great.
Thanks for listening.
Goodbye,
See you next time.
Bye-bye.